The lamp burned low. He wrote fast, then stopped, scratched out a line, wrote again. The paper was thin, the ink already bleeding through where his hand pressed too hard. He knew better than to explain too much. Words could be traced. Conclusions could be used against the wrong people. He chose directions instead of names, marks instead of accusations. He avoided verbs that sounded final. He left a sentence unfinished and drew a line through it, as if even the thought of finishing it felt dangerous. Outside the room, something shifted boots on wood, a voice that did not belong to the night. He paused, listening, counting his breaths the way you do when you already know what's coming. He folded the letter once, then again, did not sign it the way he used to. Then he sealed the envelope with the stub of a candle and pressed his thumb into the wax until it hurt. The door creaked. He did not look back at the desk. He took the envelope, slipped it inside his coat, and moved. He blew out the lamp as he passed, plunging the room into a darkness that felt earned. By the time the door opened behind him, he was already in the hall, already running, already shedding pieces of the life he could no longer afford to keep. The letter began its journey without a return address. Weeks later, a woman stepped down from a stagecoach into a frontier town where dust clung to every hem and the air carried the sharp tang of iron. She stood still for a moment, letting the noise pass around her. She did not look lost. Half a continent lay behind her, carried in a single envelope that refused to say what it meant. She tightened her grip on her satchel and walked forward anyway. Because sometimes the only honest answer to a question that won't explain itself is to go and see where it leads. She stood for a moment after the stagecoach pulled away, long enough for the dust to settle and for a few curious eyes to decide she was not worth staring at. This pause matters. People reveal themselves in the seconds they think no one is watching. Camp Verde revealed its impatience first. Men moved with the confidence of those who believed the land had been waiting for them. The buildings leaned into the street as if tired of holding themselves upright. Nothing here was temporary, and nothing felt secure. June adjusted the strap of her satchel and walked forward. She watched how people crossed the street, how they avoided certain doorways, how conversation dipped when a stranger passed too close. That look in her eyes is the look of those who are taught to measure a room before speaking in it. The sheriff's office announced itself with a faded sign and a door that did not quite shut. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and tobacco was so heavy that it became too much to be pleasant. The man behind the desk did not stand when she entered. He glanced at her boots, then her hands, then the satchel, deciding which part of her story would be easiest to dismiss. She stated her business clearly. She had papers. She named a man who should have been here and was not. She did not raise her voice. She delivered her purposes with all the respects she could contain. Yet, the sheriff listened with the expression of someone waiting for a woman to tire herself out. When she slid her documents across the desk, his fingers touched them with visible reluctance. He read just enough to confirm they were real, then leaned back, chair creaking under his weight. "You're a long way from where you belong," he said. The sentence shaped like advice, but sharpened into something else. June did not bristle. That surprised him. It's surprising to men when calm refuses to turn into shame. She asked her questions anyway. Where the project office was, who oversaw it, when the last reports had been filed. Each answer came slower than the last, padded with indifference, edged with implication. By the time he suggested she might find more suitable work elsewhere, his meaning was clear enough to be insulting without the courtesy of honesty. This was when her name mattered. June Hartwell, she said. He repeated it poorly, already forgetting the sound of it. Names like hers were meant to be written, not remembered. She left without asking for permission to go. Outside, the sun had climbed higher. She walked the length of the street, counting doors, reading hand-painted signs, absorbing the rhythm of a place that ran on familiarity and exclusion. Towns like this, they are not hostile because they hate women. In fact, women were not considered part of the machinery at all. June did not return to her boarding room. She sat on a low wall near the edge of town and took out the letter. She did not reread it in full. She traced the marks that had first unsettled her. Directions that leaned when they should have held straight. Distances that made sense only if someone wanted them to. Her brother had always been careful enough to know how to speak without saying by late afternoon. She understood one thing clearly. Whatever answer she was looking for would not be handed to her by a man behind a desk. If there was a truth here, it would be found the hard way, by walking the ground and comparing what existed to what was supposed to. June folded the letter and placed it back in her satchel. She decided to stop asking to be taken seriously and started acting as if she already was. She began with walking. She followed the edge of Camp Verde where buildings thinned and the land started to speak for itself. Should trust the ground more than people. The ground does not lie out of malice. It lies only when someone forces it to. June walked slowly, counting her steps, letting the heat settle into her bones. She took out her map once, then folded it away again, choosing first to see what was there before comparing it to what was supposed to be. The river curved where the paper said it should straighten. A cut through the brush suggested recent work, but it did not match the markings filed with the territorial office. She stopped, turned back, walked the same stretch again. She sat on a rock and finally unfolded the map. The lines were clean, confident, drawn by men who believed accuracy was a matter of skill alone. June traced one route with her finger, then lifted her hand and traced the same line in the air, matching it to the horizon. The alignment felt wrong, not dramatically wrong, just enough to lean. That was the troubling part. Big lies are easy to spot. Small ones require intention. By midday, she had found 3 discrepancies. Each could be explained away. Each could be dismissed as an error. Together, they formed a direction. June pressed her lips together when she saw it. A man working near the road watched her longer than courtesy required. When she met his eyes, he looked away quickly, then back again. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said. Not unkindly, but not helpfully either. Some things are settled already. June thanked him and kept walking. By late afternoon, she was certain of only one thing. The project was not drifting by accident. Someone had chosen this path carefully, trusting that no one would bother to check the ground against the promise. June folded the map with deliberate care and placed it back in her satchel. By the time June understood, she would not find what she was looking for inside town limits. The sun had begun its slow descent, flattening the world into long shadows and sharper truths. Camp Verde grew quieter in that particular way frontier towns do, when work ends and watchfulness begins. She felt it then, not fear exactly, but the awareness that she had crossed from being unnoticed into being inconvenient. She asked once, carefully, about someone who knew the land beyond the marked routes. The answer came after a pause that was too long to be casual. "There's a man," the woman said, eyes already drifting away. "Lives out past the Sawmill Road. Keeps to himself. If you're sensible, you won't bother him." June thanked her and did exactly what women like her are often punished for doing. She bothered him. The cabin sat where the trees began to close ranks, plain and unadorned, built for function rather than welcome. Smoke lifted cleanly from the chimney, thin and controlled. Eli was splitting wood when she arrived. He did not look up at first, though he knew she was there. Some people sense interruption the way animals sense weather. He finished the swing he was in, set the axe down, and only then turned. June introduced herself. She did not extend her hand. She explained what she needed in plain terms. She asked if he would take her to a section of land that did not appear on the official route the way it should. Eli listened without comment. When she finished, he said one word, "Don't know." It was said evenly, without apology. June did not argue. She asked a second question, then a third, each narrower than the last. Each time, the answer was the same. "Don't know." She studied him then. The distance he kept, the way his eyes flicked once toward her map and then away. "I'll go myself," she said at last. That made him look at her properly. She turned and walked back the way she had come, the satchel knocking lightly against her hip. She did not hurry. That was either bravery or ignorance. Possibly both. Eli watched her go. He did not call after her. He waited until she had passed the tree line and was out of sight, then reached for the map she had left unfolded on a stump when the wind caught it. He did not need long. One glance was enough to see what she had missed. Not the error she had seen that, but the scale of it. The distances that lied quietly, the routes that would turn treacherous without warning. He stood there for a long moment, the map in his hands, jaw tightening. By the time June realized she was no longer alone, the light had changed. Eli walked up beside her without announcing himself. "You don't read maps," he said. She did not take offense. "I did." He nodded once, then said, "Don't seem like it." He did not say he would help or apologize for earlier. He simply adjusted the strap of his pack and started walking, assuming she would follow. June fell into step beside him without comment. The land changed before any person spoke. Trees thinned, then gathered again in uneven ranks, as if choosing sides. Eli slowed without warning. June noticed the shift and matched it. He did not explain. He adjusted. They stopped at a narrow wash where the brush gave way to exposed earth. June knelt, pressed her fingers into the soil, and looked up toward the line of low hills. "This water ran recently," she said. "More recently than the filings allow." Eli nodded once. They rushed. She unfolded the map, careful to keep it weighted against the breeze. "And they plan to come back," she added, "not to finish." "This isn't drift," he said quietly. "No." She agreed. They were seen. A movement between the trees, then another. Eli raised a hand, palm outward, pause. June stopped at once. She had learned when to let someone else speak first. A man stepped forward, posture guarded, eyes steady. He spoke in a language June did not know. Eli answered, brief and respectful. June kept her gaze level but soft, letting the exchange find its shape. Silence, in the right hands, can be a courtesy. They were led along a path that widened into a small cluster of dwellings set back from the main route. Smoke lifted from cooking fires. Children paused, watching. Women watched longer, always. Trust the way women assess risk without spectacle, inside a shaded structure. They were asked why they were there. The question was simple. The weight behind it was not. June spoke when the space was given. "I'm here because the land is being moved on paper," she said. "And what's on paper doesn't match what's happening here." A murmur followed skepticism, something like exhaustion. She laid out what she had found without embellishment. Water diverted, roots shifted just enough to force choices later. Pressure applied slowly so it would feel inevitable. "It won't look like theft at first," she said. A woman across from her leaned forward. And then someone will be blamed for resisting," June replied. "And it won't be the men who drew the lines." Arguments broke out, sharp and weary by turns. "We've heard this before," someone said. And nothing changed. Eli stood apart, arms loose at his sides. When he finally spoke, the space quieted not because he demanded it, because he waited for it. "I worked these routes," he said, "cleared some of them. I didn't ask who would pay later." A voice cut in. "Why should we listen to you now?" He did not bristle. "You shouldn't," he said. "Not because of who I am, because of what I won't do." "What won't you do?" The same voice pressed. "I won't be quiet when this turns ugly," Eli answered. "And it will, if no one stops it." He did not claim belonging he knew was contested. He did not apologize in a way that asked to be forgiven. He named the blood he carried without asking it to excuse him. "I won't help make this worse," he said. "That's all I can offer." A long pause followed. It was not an agreement. An elder spoke at last. "Words don't stop men with papers." "No," June said. "But records do. And witnesses." Eyes turned to her. "You think that protects us? I think it makes it harder to erase you," she said. "That matters." By the time they were allowed to leave, dusk had begun to settle. They were watched, not followed, as they walked back toward the trees. June felt the weight of what they had stirred. This was the consequence. Halfway back, Eli stopped. He crouched and brushed aside leaves, revealing a set of tracks that were not theirs. "Someone listens," he said. June did not ask who. "Then we don't have time," she replied. Night gathered as they reached the cabin. Inside, Eli lit the lamp and stepped back. June set her satchel down and stood very still. Proof had come at a cost. She took out her paper. "I'll write a letter," she said. Eli nodded. "Make it clean." "It will be," she said. "Should be enough to stand outside." The forest held its breath. June wrote while the lamp burned steady. Its flame trimmed low, the way Eli preferred. The cabin held its breath around her. Outside, the forest had settled into a watchful quiet, the kind that does not promise safety so much as it measures it. She did not write like someone pleading to be believed. Even that impulse would creep in when she had spent a lifetime being doubted. June resisted it. She wrote as if the facts themselves deserved respect. She named what could be proven and left the rest where it belonged in the margin. Waiting. When she finished, she read it once, then again, looking not for grace, but for cracks. She struck through a sentence that leaned too hard on certainty and rewrote it in terms that could survive scrutiny. This was not a letter meant to persuade. Eli watched from the doorway, saying nothing. When she folded the paper, he handed her a clean envelope without comment. "Benjamin Rowland," she said. Writing the name carefully, Eli nodded. "He'll read it, and then he'll decide to toss it or send someone here to confirm." She sealed the envelope. The wax cooled quickly in the night air. June pressed it flat with her thumb. She stood, slipped on her coat, and stepped outside. The courier left before dawn. They did not talk about what came next. The unspoken filled the space just fine. June made tea. Eli checked the perimeter without being asked. It arrived after dark. Hooves first, then voices. The sound of men who believed they were expected. June did not reach for anything. She opened the door before Eli could stop her. Charles Wainwright stepped into the lamplight with the ease of a man accustomed to rooms rearranging themselves around him. His smile was measured, professional, and empty of warmth. "Miss Hartwell," he said, "we should talk." June did not correct his tone or his timing. "Here," she asked. He glanced past her, took in Eli's presence with a brief, dismissive assessment, somewhere more suitable. Eli took a half-step forward. "She's not, I'll go," June said, and held his gaze long enough to be clear. Wainwright smiled again, wise. June took her satchel. She did not take the letter. That was already gone where it needed to be. She stepped down from the threshold and turned once more toward Eli. "Don't follow," she said quietly. Eli's jaw tightened. He watched her leave, measuring distance and time the way he always had, as the horses moved off. The cabin fell back into silence. Eli stood in the doorway until the sound was gone, then closed the door and extinguished the lamp. He did not go to sleep. He packed instead. June rode into the dark without looking back. A woman chooses to walk into danger with her eyes open. Doesn't always mean she believes she will be saved, because she believes time, carefully spent, can still be bought, soon. June reached the camp, beyond the last stand of trees. The land lost its patience. Light fell in clean segments, interrupted only by canvas and timber arranged with careful intent. The men worked without conversation. Nothing here invited rest. Even quiet felt like something that had been decided in advance. June was given a small room set apart from the main structures. A courtesy, they called it, a place to rest. The door closed without force, yet it left no doubt that control had shifted to the other side. The bed was narrow, the frame iron, the blanket thin. A basin of water sat on a stool, already cold. Nothing was wrong with the room. That was the point. She sat on the edge of the bed and did not turn on the lamp right away. In the dark, she let herself breathe. Once, twice. Then the breath broke. She cried without noise, hand pressed to her mouth, shoulders rigid as if stillness might keep her intact. The tears came anyway, hot and unwelcome. The kind of feelings that broke her down wasn't fear. This was something older. The exhaustion of always being the one who had to be careful. The weight of knowing that if she faltered, even for a moment, it would be used to explain why she should never have come. She wiped her face quickly at the sound of boots passing outside, rinsed her hands in the basin, splashed water on her cheeks until the sting returned her to herself. By the time she lit the lamp, the crying had been folded away where it could not be seen. No one knocked that night. She did not sleep. She listened instead to the rhythm of the camp, the laughter that carried too easily for men who believed themselves safe, the distant clink of tools being put away with the confidence that they would be there in the morning. When dawn came, it found her seated upright, coat folded, satchel closed. Charles Wainwright sent for her near midday. His office was a larger version of her room cleaner, brighter, with a desk that suggested authority rather than function. He stood when she entered, a gesture designed to feel generous. "Miss Hartwell," he said, "I trust you slept." "I rested," she replied. He smiled as if that were close enough. He gestured for her to sit and took his place opposite her, fingers steepled. "I'm told you've been asking questions," he said lightly. "I've been verifying information," June answered. "No difference, in my experience." He leaned back. "You're here because of your brother." She watched him carefully. The lie came next, delivered with the smoothness of someone practiced in reassurance. "Samuel was alive," he said. "Busy, engaged in work too sensitive to explain." "He knew you'd worry," Wainwright added, voice warm. "Men like him forget how that looks from the outside." June let the words settle. She did not react. "You're very intelligent," he continued. "That's rare out here, rarer still in a woman. You could be useful to us." "Us," she echoed. He nodded. "You see what others miss. You understand systems. I admire that." His eyes held hers, assessing, weighing. But intelligence without guidance can become misdirected. You still need someone to help you see the larger picture. There it was. The offer was disguised as concern. The insult was padded with praise. June tilted her head slightly. "And you think that someone is. You. I think you would benefit from standing on the right side of progress," he said. "From having a man who understands the realities of this work." She thought of the room she had cried in. The thin blanket. The locked door. She nodded slowly. "I'll consider what you've said," she replied. He smiled, satisfied. "Good. Take a day. Walk the site. See what we're building." Seemed he had loosened something in her. For 2 days. June did exactly as she was permitted. She walked where she was allowed. She asked harmless questions. She watched how men spoke. At night, she returned to her room, closed the door, and let the silence press against her until it stopped shaking her. On the 3rd night, she moved. She waited for the camp to lose its edge, for laughter to fade into habit, and for watchfulness to dull under the weight of its own routine. She slipped from her room with only the satchel and the confidence of a woman who has learned to be invisible when necessary. Wainwright's office was unlocked. Of course it was. Men who trust in power rarely believe in locks. Inside, the desk held what she expected, maps adjusted by degrees small enough to be deniable. Correspondence that spoke of flexibility and anticipated resistance. She copied what she could, quickly. The door closed behind her. Wainwright did not raise his voice. "You disappoint me," he said, almost gently. "I thought you were smarter than this." June straightened. "You don't look surprised." He sighed. "You think you can get away with that?" His eyes flicked to the papers in her hands. "You think those will save you." "What I think doesn't matter," she said. "What's written does." His expression hardened. "You've overestimated your abilities." She met his gaze. "Have I?" The decision came quickly after that. She was to be taken to the edge of the disputed land at first light. An unfortunate accident. A story that would point in a familiar direction. As they led her away, June showed no emotions. There's no point doing that anyway. She walked with her head up, breathing steady, somewhere beyond the camp lights. A man was already moving. They moved her before dawn, when darkness still held enough authority to disguise intention. June walked between 2 men who did not touch her unless they had to. As they moved closer to the disputed boundary, the path tightened underfoot. The land itself reduced to a line that had been debated so often it no longer felt real until you stood on it. Here, it became physical again. Rocks cut through the soil like exposed bone. The air thinned. Even the birds kept their distance. The man walking ahead slowed. He was familiar. June had seen his face in the village days earlier, nodding along, quiet and attentive. "You don't have to do this," she said, not raising her voice. "There won't be nothing left to give you." He did not turn. "Women like you don't understand power," he replied. "He needs me." "No," June said. "Trust me, he doesn't." That made him stop. He looked back at her then, anger flashing before it was shown. "You think you know him more than I do? I think you don't even know him," she said. "When this is done, there won't be a tribe left to rule." The guards shifted. One of them laughed, nervous and quick. They were close now. The boundary markers were visible. A sound broke the morning. It was a steady approach of footsteps, too many to mistake. The men froze. From the ridge above, figures emerged, members of the community, faces set, moving with purpose. At their center stood the elder who had spoken first, staff grounded firmly in the earth. Behind them came others, carrying the kind of certainty that did not need no more explanation. And then Eli stepped forward. "Do not move," he said. The guards looked to the man who had led them. He faltered. The calculation he had trusted no longer held. A horse snorted behind them. More figures appeared, men in uniform this time, led by Jonathan Hale. "This ends here," Hale said. "Step away." The man who had betrayed the community began to protest. The words tumbled over one another, frantic now. Hale did not listen. The elder raised his hand, and two men stepped forward to take the traitor into custody. What followed was absent of struggle, marked only by the unmistakable sense that something had been decided and could not be undone. June exhaled for the first time since the night she had left the cabin. The guards dropped their weapons. Someone wept. The sound came from behind them, thin and broken. Hale approached June. "You all right?" She nodded. "Yes." He looked past her to Eli. "You kept your word," Hale said. Eli inclined his head once. "So did you." By the time the sun cleared the ridge, the story had changed shape. What was meant to look like an accident had become a record. Witnesses stood where erasure had been planned. They did not return to camp immediately. There were statements to take, people to steady. June watched Eli move among the community without claiming authority or retreating from it, present in a way that required no explanation. When Hale finally gave the order to move, it felt less like retreat than release. June stood at the edge of the boundary and looked back once. She didn't smile. Victory, when it comes without spectacle, carries a different weight. What now? Eli joined her. "It's not done," he said. "No," she agreed. "But at least there's a way." They walked away together. Behind them, the markers stood where they should have all along. The documents were taken quietly. Jonathan Hale arrived with a small detail and an even smaller appetite for conversation. And by the time dust settled, the papers that had justified expansion, displacement, and silence were boxed, sealed, and removed from the camp. The system did not collapse. It was simply adjusted. Orders came down swiftly after. Survey lines were reinstated. Work crews were reassigned. What had been bent was forced back into place. The project would continue, Hale made clear, but under scrutiny, with limits that could be measured and questioned. Wainwright watched this from a distance, outwardly composed, offering no resistance that could be named. Power, when it leaves a man like that, does not announce itself either. It recedes, one assumption at a time, by nightfall. His authority had thinned to gestures no one followed and orders no one waited for. Later, alone in the office that no longer answered him, he stood among the stripped shelves and cleared desk. The silence pressed in, unshaped and unmoved by his presence. In it, old voices returned, the kind that do not soften with age, a father's contempt, delivered early and often, reminding him that worth was something he did not have, and that his weakness invited correction. He had learned that lesson well enough to build a life around it, mistaking control for proof that he was not what he had been told he was, and he reached for the gun. There was no audience when the end came, no note, only one decision, made with the same narrow certainty that had guided every other choice. By morning, the camp would speak of it in lowered tones, as if restraint might make sense of it, but the truth was simpler and harder to sit with. Some men do not survive the moment when the structure holding them upright is removed, and nothing else has been built underneath. The system moved on without him, as systems do, correcting its posture and insisting that this, finally, was the proper alignment, even as the cost of arriving there remained unevenly accounted for. June was sorting her notes when Hale appeared at the doorway. She had been copying figures into the margin, checking one against another, when she felt someone waiting. She finished the line before looking up. "They found him," Hale said. She did not ask who he meant. "Alive, yes. Where outside the main roots, hurt, but stable." June nodded and set the pencil down. She sat, pressed her hands together until they stopped shaking. "When can I see him this afternoon?" When she saw her brother later, he looked smaller than she remembered, thinner, his face marked by weeks that had not been kind. He smiled anyway. She sat beside him and took his hand. "You could just have ignored my notes," he said quietly. "Please," she replied. "You know I wouldn't." Work resumed around them. The project did not stop, but it slowed. Survey lines were corrected, then checked again. Water access was restored where it had been quietly diverted. Reports were required and reviewed. Arguments followed. Hale spoke with Eli away from the center of the camp. June was close enough to hear pieces of it. "It won't stay fixed on its own," Hale said. "Someone will try to bend it back." Eli did not answer immediately. "And when that happens, you'll be expected to say something." "I don't think someone would like what I say." Hale looked at him. "Well, no one likes what I say." Eli glanced once toward the hills before nodding. "I'll talk to you later. Don't leave me waiting." That was the extent of it. June did not comment. She knew better than to crowd a decision that had already settled. She left the frontier a few days later. She packed her satchel and the documents she would need to carry east. Eli walked her to the edge of town, where the road widened and stopped belonging to anyone in particular. "You'll write," he said. "Yes." He hesitated, then added, "I will too." They exchanged addresses, written clearly. She climbed onto the stagecoach, resisting the urge of looking back. The years that followed were ordinary. June returned to her work and did it carefully. Letters arrived from Eli at uneven intervals, brief at first, then steadier. She answered when she could. They did not turn distance into a test. It was something that already existed. The project ended without incident. Its boundaries held, and the community remained. June returned west on a clear afternoon, the light plain enough to show what time had changed and what it had not. Eli waited near the road. "You're late," he said. "I took the long way," she replied. They stood there a moment longer after that, the road open behind her and the land settling into its familiar stillness. Nothing pressed them forward. Nothing needed to be decided out loud. The years between them did not require explanation, and neither of them tried to reduce what had passed into something tidy enough to carry easily. June became aware of her hands again. The faint traces of ink still caught along her fingers, despite the travel, despite time. She turned them slightly, as if seeing them for the first time. They looked ordinary, useful, unremarkable. And yet they held the evidence of choices she had not walked away from, questions she had followed when it would have been simpler to stop asking. She understood then that the clarity she had insisted on had done more than hold a project to its proper limits or keep a piece of land from being quietly taken apart. It had kept her from doing the same to herself. She had not chosen safety at the cost of becoming smaller. She had not learned to soften what she knew in order to be left alone. That decision had followed her east and back again, through years that were mostly quiet, through work done carefully, through letters written and answered without ceremony. It had shaped what remained. Eli watched her, patient, unexpecting. She met his gaze and felt no urgency to name what this moment meant. Whatever came next would not be built on promises made too quickly. It would be built the way the rest of her life had been lately, through attention, through steadiness, through the willingness to stay present even when nothing dramatic was happening. That was enough.